It all began on an ordinary day, in a small, sleepy town nestled within the embrace of a dense forest. We were a tight-knit community, bound together by the shared struggle to carve out a life on the edge of the wild. We lived, laughed, and loved, blissfully unaware of the darkness lurking in the shadows, waiting to tear our world apart. The sun was just beginning to set when the first signs of trouble appeared. A low, guttural growl echoed through the forest, sending shivers down the spines of those who heard it. At the time, we dismissed it as the cry of some distant animal, a fleeting concern that quickly faded as the night wore on. But as darkness enveloped the town, we couldn't ignore the mounting sense of unease. The air grew heavy with a suffocating tension, pressing down on us like a weight. It was as if the very atmosphere was warning us of the impending disaster, urging us to flee while we still could. Yet we remained, bound by a stubborn loyalty to our homes and each other. It was well past midnight when the first screams shattered the silence. The sound was so chilling, so full of raw terror, that it shook us from our slumber and sent us racing into the night. And there, in the heart of our once peaceful town, we saw it, the monster that would forever haunt our nightmares. It was a hideous, twisted creature that seemed to have clawed its way out of the darkest depths of our imagination. It stood on two grotesque legs, its body covered in mottled, leathery skin that seemed to shift and undulate with a sickening, unnatural rhythm. Its arms were long and sinewy, ending in cruel, razor-sharp claws that gleamed in the moonlight. But it was the monster's face that would forever be seared into our memories. Its eyes were twin pools of inky darkness, devoid of any semblance of humanity or warmth. Its mouth was a gaping maw filled with rows of jagged teeth, slick with the blood of its victims. As we stood there, frozen by a primal fear that threatened to overwhelm us, the monster continued its rampage, tearing through our neighbors and friends with a ruthless, mindless savagery. It seemed to revel in the chaos and carnage it caused, its guttural growls intermingling with the screams of the dying. We tried to fight back, to defend our homes and loved ones, but our weapons were useless against the creature's seemingly impenetrable heart. It moved with a terrifying speed and agility, striking down even the bravest among us without breaking stride. It was clear that we were no match for the monster that had descended upon our town. As the night wore on, and the monster's relentless slaughter continued, it became painfully clear that our only hope for survival was to flee. And so, with heavy hearts, we abandoned our homes and the memories they held, seeking refuge in the surrounding forest. The woods were dark and foreboding, filled with the sounds of creatures unseen. We moved as quickly and quietly as we could, our every step fraught with the fear that the monster would hear us and come crashing through the underbrush in pursuit. I can still remember the feeling of my heart pounding in my chest, the cold sweat that drenched my clothes, and the desperate, choking sobs of those around me. Despite the overwhelming terror that gripped us, we pushed on, driven by the instinct to survive. We clung to each other, our shared nightmare drawing us closer together even as the world around us fell apart. But our flight through the forest was not without cost. One by one, my friends had fallen victim to the monster's relentless pursuit. It seemed to revel in the hunt, stalking us through the trees with a cruel and calculating intelligence. No matter how fast or far we ran, it was always there, waiting to strike when we least expected it. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, our numbers dwindled until only I remained. I was the last survivor, the sole witness to the unspeakable horror that had befallen my town. The weight of my grief and guilt threatened to crush me. But still, I continued to run, driven by the memory of those I had lost and the fear of the monster that hunted me. At last, when I was weak from hunger and exhaustion, the monster finally cornered me. I found myself standing at the edge of a cliff, with nowhere left to run. The creature's dark eyes bored into mine, filled with a malevolent glee as it prepared to claim its final prize. In that moment, as death loomed over me, something within me snapped. The fear that had gripped me for so long was replaced by a cold, burning fury. I would not die like this, I vowed, a helpless victim to a cruel and heartless monster. And so, with a primal scream, I launched myself at the creature, determined to fight to my last breath. We, on the edge of the cliff, our battle a desperate dance between life and death. My hands found purchase on the monster's leathery hide, and with every ounce of strength left in my body, I shoved it towards the precipice. In that final, heart-stopping moment, the monster's eyes widened in shock and fear as it teetered on the edge. And then, with a gut-wrenching howl, it plummeted over the cliffside, disappearing into the darkness below. In the days and weeks that followed, I searched for any survivors, any sign that someone else had managed to escape the monster's wrath. But my search was in vain, and I was forced to accept the terrible truth. I was the only one left. I returned to the ruined remains of my town, a broken and haunted man. The once familiar streets were now a twisted labyrinth of destruction and despair. Every shattered building and blood-stained cobblestone a painful reminder of the life that had been ripped away from me. With nothing left to tie me to this place, I decided to leave, to carry the burden of my memories into the world beyond. I would tell my story to any who would listen, a warning of the darkness that lurked in the shadows, waiting to strike. As I set out on my journey, I made a solemn vow. I would never forget the friends and family I had lost to the monster's bloodlust. Their memory would live on in my heart, a constant reminder of the fragile beauty of life and the cruel hand of fate.